Welcome to Worldy Unboxed, the Founders Edition. I am Brandan, one of the co-founders of Worldy. As a quick reminder, this episode format features a sit down with the founder, followed by a recap of the conversation with Aaron and I, where you will have an opportunity to learn more about our goals and vision and what takeaways we highlight from our conversation with the founder. Today's guest is Kory Stevens, the founder of Taft. Kory launched Taft as a no-show sock startup that morphed into a very successful high-end boot brand. Join us today as we discover more about the origins of Taft, get Kory's takes on the trends in e-commerce and direct-to-consumer brands, get advice on bootstrapping in today's landscape, and finally, some guidance for new and aspiring entrepreneurs. This particular episode will be a bit on the longer side, but we believe there is some good content that listeners may find helpful, if not interesting. So let's get started.
Yeah. So let's talk about Taft a little bit. How did you come up with that idea? Because I think it might have started off as a sock idea. So just talk about like how you came up with that and some of the pivots, and how you got to focusing on boots.
Yeah, so I grew up, and I loved the sockless look. I would wear Sperry's, Jack Purcell's. I loved that like little ankle showing, and so I would always like borrow my mom's no-show socks. But then, dude, like the men's toenails and like, it's just like they're not meant for men essentially. And anytime you have to take your shoes off, it's kind of embarrassing, So when I graduated college, my wife and I were like, what are we going to do? I wanted to get into management consulting, but I didn't get an offer. And so I was like, we were on a trip and we saw this kind of this sockless look. And we're like, hey, let's start a no-show sock company. And so I get back from the trip and I start designing socks. My college ID and password still worked on the school's computers. And so I was booking classes to learn Illustrator, Photoshop. And so I learned how to design these socks. And then about 9 months later, we launched a Kickstarter campaign for the socks. And then we ran, Taft. It was originally called Wimbley's. And then we ran it as a sock company for about a little over a year. And then we got a cease and desist because the name had some conflicts. So we had to change the name to Taft, which it obviously is now. And then in November of 2015, we went from socks to shoes. And that happened because, this was the heyday of Instagram. Like it was so easy to grow an account back then. And so we had like 300,000 or 400,000 followers that all thought we were a shoe company. Because we were taking pictures. I was going to shoe stores, taking pictures of the shoes with the socks and then returning the shoes. But we really looked like a shoe company. Our pictures were very shoe focused because socks are just kind of boring, not super exciting. This is like pre-Stance, and so we looked like a shoe company. And eventually we were like, hey, my wife and I were like, hey, if we want to do this big and get serious about it, grow a big business, we need to sell something more than socks. And so then I went to Spain, designed a little collection, and then in November of 2015, we launched shoes, and then we never made socks again. So we did one production run of socks. It lasted us a year and a half, and then we've been a shoe company ever since.
Did you realize how hard footwear was before you made that pivot, or not so much?
Dude, I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. The lack of stability, the insecurity, the ups and downs, the roller coaster, like that. My personality is not built that way. I do not thrive in those types of situations. And so I didn't even want to be an entrepreneur, let alone all of a sudden I'm designing socks. And then all of a sudden I'm designing shoes. Like I am no more passionate about shoes than I am supply chain or finance or anything else. Like no, it was not, none of this was intentional, to be honest. It was all luck. It was all providence. It was all destiny and chance. Like none of this was planned. Like I see what you guys are doing, and there's such consideration, a level of deliberateness, intention, clear direction, focus. Like that's so sick because on a next business, I'll have that. On that business, I just did not have it. And I didn't know what I was getting myself into, to be honest.
So you didn't want to be an entrepreneur, but now you want to be an entrepreneur again. So you're just kind of like a sucker for pain, or like, what's the deal there?
No, like masochism over here. Yeah, I think it's like I think the idea of working for someone else at this point would be really difficult. I'm a good team player. Like I can get along with just about anyone. I have good emotional skills, good social skills, but I think it would be hard for me to work for someone else now. I've tasted the freedom, the liberation, the credit card points, the PTO, whenever you want, like all those little perks that I didn't even know were going to come are now the things that draw me back into it. And I think that there is something really special about, right now in the situation I'm in, I'm trying to figure out what's next. And all I can think about is starting something else. Like that's all I could think about. I can't imagine going and getting a job. I've learned 8 years of lessons, and now I want to go apply them. And so, yeah, I'm not into the pain. I'm not into the masochism, but I think the perks and the benefits are so great if it works out, that it's just like a higher level of work. Like I can't imagine just contributing to a company that I take no participation in the upside. Like now it's like I want to change the world through a company. I've seen it work once, and I just think that I'd have to do it again. Anything
Yeah,
else would seem a little bit lackluster.
that definitely resonates with me. So do you have any idea then kind of like what's next, or what that next opportunity looks like, even if it's from like these are the boxes that I want to check off, but I don't necessarily know what that job is?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that I'm thinking ecom, I'm thinking product, just like my sweet spot, right? Like that's what my network is, that's what my resources are, that's what my expertise is in now. And so I'm definitely thinking product. Over the years, I've kind of kept a running list of ideas that I've had that I wasn't able to pursue. So I've obviously revisited that, added to it, narrowed it down. Um, for me, I think that it, shoes was really hard. And you guys are jumping into it. Like, already, I'm sure that footwear is hard. It's expensive. It's competitive. It's crowded. You have some massive, massive players, especially in your world. Like you're going after some of the most famous brands of all time that happen to be in footwear. And I love you going after them. I think that there are some greener pastures that I'm looking to, right? Like I think that you guys have a really unique approach to footwear. Taft wasn't that unique or special, right? Like for me, when I started Taft, it was like this D2C cut out the middleman story that was so hot in like 2014, 2015. It was like, that's what was the magic, was just sell it D2C, whatever the product, do it, have a bar graph that shows like no wholesale markup, and then you can sell anything. And then, over time I realized, man, the magic of Taft is actually the shoe design. And I just wasn't expecting that. But Taft on the surface is like, it's not that special or unique. Whereas what I think you guys are doing is actually a lot more unique and differentiated. And for me, whatever I do, it has to be a really standout product, really, really differentiated. Because if it's not, it's too hard. And I was always kind of battling against, it's like, it's so crowded. And I'm trying to like, think of like, Tokyo subways, when you see those people trying to like cram one more person in, that's how I felt, like trying with all my heart to get one more person on that train in this footwear space. And it was just like, I'm also dressed in a suit and tie, just like everyone else on this train. And so for me now, if it's not really differentiated and unique, everything else is just so much harder. The marketing, the storytelling, the brand, the creative, how you find your people. If it is differentiated, it's a lot easier. And so I think that I stumbled into a business that was pretty difficult on the difficulty scale in terms of product. It's freaking expensive, producing in Europe. A lot of crazy stuff has happened since I started Taft. And so, dude, I'm rambling. I'm sorry, but I'm
No, you're
just
not.
huge
You're
fan of
not.
what you guys are doing. And I think that you're going after it in such a way that it's as if we talked and I told you, dude, it has to be different, has to be unique, has to have its own voice. I didn't really have what Worldy has back in 2015. And so I'm pumped for you guys, because I think that you've already kind of learned, you've naturally been drawn to something that's different. And I think that that's the key.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because a lot of people we come across, they're basically like, your product is not differentiated at all. And I mean, I feel the same way as you. Like, if I were to start another company, I would want to do something that's just so clearly differentiated that that's never a question, right? Like, nobody's ever like, well, what about, how is this different from Nike? I'd want it to be something where it's like, oh, there's no other product really that does this. And it's probably hard to find a product like that, especially if you want to do e-com and a physical
Yeah.
product. But I think that's one of the main learnings that I've had so far as well.
I mean, how do you feel like you guys are doing at that? Because obviously some people are like, hey, it's not different enough. Do you think it's different enough?
I think the mission and the brand story is differentiated, and I think the product will be differentiated, but it's not protected by IP or anything like that. So it's almost like, how can we continue to iterate and really focus on this target segment that we feel like is underserved, and then once we do have money, invest in that and create something that's a bit more defensible.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, just being transparent, the thing that concerns me most about our business is really nothing that we're doing from a product standpoint can't be copied. But I mean, I feel like I said before, some of the other stuff we're doing can't really be copied. So we really have to knock that stuff out of the park. Whereas when we first started, we were kind of like, oh, we just have to knock the product out of the park. And then from there, it'll be easy. But it's really, you knock the other stuff out of the park. And then the product, it's almost like table stakes. So that's kind
Yeah.
of the way we're thinking about it now.
Like, it's kind of like chicken or the egg vibes. Like, are they buying the product because it's unique and special and sticking around for the brand, or are they in love with that other kind of more less tangible stuff and then being convinced to buy the product? It's like, yeah, I mean, dude, as a pretty educated opinion on footwear, I see what you're doing as unique and different. Like, I think it's cool. I'm a fan, man. I'm a big fan.
I'm a bit more of like a romantic, I guess, when it comes to business, especially startups. So I think the branding does matter, but there's a lot of people kind of like investor types that are just like, there's no IP here. This is not differentiated. Nike could do this. So there's definitely people out there like that. But one of the things you said was that the magic of Taft was in the design, and you don't have a footwear design background as far as I can tell. So like, how did you go about actually understanding how to do this very esoteric thing?
Dude, I wonder if I could quickly. Yeah, dude, here's a couple things. I mean, this is just like my crappy notes, but it might be kind of fun to see. Like, so you're right. I'm not like a technical designer. I have no, everyone's like, what kind of tablet do you use to design? I'm like, no, 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 no. I'm not like that. Like, I am a shoe designer, but I did it out of necessity because the business needed it. And then it ended up being, the magic, like you said. But, these are like, my shoe designs can look like this. Like, these are literally collections of shoes. And then, sometimes I'll mess around, like I can draw a little bit, but like I see tons of like TikToks and Instagram accounts where it's like these people are drawing, like they're at dinner and they're drawing on the table and it's like the sickest sneaker silhouette you've ever seen. I am not like that. And so, yeah, I still like, I did footwear. Yeah. On paper, I designed thousands of shoes, but I would never go work as a shoe designer anywhere. And I will not do shoes again, most likely.
Yeah.
Like, it was what the business needed at that time. But I mean, you guys are wearing so many hats. That was one of the hats. It doesn't mean I'm an expert. Doesn't mean I'm going to do it for the rest of my life. It was just what was needed of me. And I think that being an entrepreneur is just kind of seeing the need and filling the seat when needed, and I think that good entrepreneurs are just proficient and kind of, minimally capable in lots of things.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the design ended up being the magic. And then it had a very unique, I mean, dude, Taft product is really polarizing, right? Like, not everyone likes it. And that's kind of the whole point. Like, it's very specialty, very niche, but then it became so important that I had that vision and that kind of voice in the product. And so then I just kept doing it, right? Like, I never relinquished that to anyone else. I never hired it out. Like, that was probably the most important thing I uniquely contributed to the business. Lots of stuff anyone could do. The shoe design ended up being so important that I always did it until I left.
So did you have other designers or like a developer that you were working with in the early days, or was it just you in the factory?
Yeah, I mean, the brilliant thing is, and I don't know, I'm sure you found the same thing as you've been working with factories, but the good factories that are willing to take a shot with you guys have their own in-house developers, right? Like, and so I didn't have to learn how to make patterns. I didn't have to learn how to like do technical CAD drawings. Like I relied heavily and sought out factories that would help fill in those gaps. And so in the early days, I mean, dude, I literally boarded a flight with my broken Spanish, went to Spain, and like sat down at a table and had a guy drawing shoes because I at that point I couldn't draw at all. And we were just like, I was learning all this new vocabulary, and we had a million swatches. And I'm just like, this in the toe cap, this in the middle. So I didn't know any of the right words. And to be honest, all the way till the end, it didn't really look that much different. Like factories that are willing to work with you have the resources and have the people in those seats that can do it. And so, dude, it's like that's not the magic. It's the concepts, not like the technical, tangible, super super specific type stuff. So no, dude, we I just kind of freestyled it, learned as I went. And now it's funny because I'm like my career's in footwear at this point.
Yeah.
And so people look to me, they're like, hey, do you want to jump into footwear? Would you want to work at this shoe company? This company would find you really valuable. It's like, yeah, in the footwear space, I'm probably the most valuable I'll ever be considered currently, right? Like that's my sweet spot. That's what I'm known for. But in my heart and in my mind, I know I'm not a footwear expert, right? Like I got the job done, but I couldn't necessarily go do it anywhere else, right? Like you guys are already surpassing me in terms of your technical skills. I never developed those, but Taft didn't reinvent the silhouette of shoes. We relied on those basic cap toe, derby, wingtip, plain toe, like we just took the staples and then we applied crazy materials to them. And that's not that hard. I mean, you guys could do that, right? Like you guys could design for Taft. If I gave you a million swatches and the basic silhouettes, you could do it too. What you guys are doing is custom outsoles. I mean, that's technical, like that's hard, right? Like you've seen like the computer program that makes those it's crazy. I've developed some, but a cup sole is even more difficult. And so yeah, I never really got there, and Taft never really needed it of me. It was more about kind of the vision of the product versus the actual skills to be able to execute on it.
Yeah. And when you were just starting out, were a lot of people kind of saying, you're crazy for trying to do this? Or did you get a lot of people saying you're not going to be able to do this?
Dude, big time. Yeah. Let me see if I could really, really quickly, if I type this into my phone, I bet I could find a picture. But yeah, I mean, I won't, but I mean, those sock designs I made, like, I mean, you guys are crazy smart. Like you guys are super smart. Imagine if one of your classmates was showing you horrible sock designs done on literally MS Paint. If you guys, I don't know how old you are, but if you remember MS Paint, like on an old Windows, I was using MS Paint to design socks. And then I'm showing my like super smart strategy friends like these socks. I'm like, hey, I'm going to graduate. I'm not going to go into management consulting and I'm going to make a sock company. I mean, it's crazy, right? Like you guys would discourage it.
Dude, I
Like
have
the
a very
best.
similar backstory.
It
So
might
in,
not.
in college, I was designing socks in PowerPoint, and
Yeah, dude.
I was telling people like I want to do this instead of going into management consulting. But then I ended up going into management consulting and not doing the sock idea.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's very, very similar. Like, so yeah, everyone, I mean, the best ideas sound stupid sometimes, right? Like the early days, like when you execute on it, it no longer sounds stupid. But think of any of these companies, you can boil it down to an idea that could sound a little bit silly. But then years into a business and scale and success, it's easy to look back and say, wow, what a brilliant idea. But like Taft was not a brilliant idea. And so then when we got into shoes, I mean, dude, I there wasn't a less equipped person to make a shoe company than me. Like, it was so out of nowhere. Crazy idea, but some people believed in me, most notably my wife. Like, she's been my partner since day one. And we just, I think our naivete allowed us to, like our ignorance and lack of experience made us like blindly optimistic and confident. And we just went for it and we had no idea what we were doing. But now looking back, my experience would make me cautious to do that again, right?
Yeah.
But at the
Yeah.
time, it was like we were young, we were married, we had one little baby, just graduated from college, and we just felt like we could take on the world, and we just started. And now looking back, it's like, oh my gosh, what were we thinking? But at the time, it was just like we were excited and we believed in it, and we just tried our best, and it ended up working out.
And were there ever times where you thought maybe Taft wasn't going to make it, or you're going to have to shut down the company?
The scariest time I ever felt with Taft was probably March 2020. I remember in January of 2020, I'd heard about this COVID thing, coronavirus, this thing that was going on in China. And I was like, well, that's weird. And then it kept getting worse. And so in February of 2020, I booked a flight to Spain, super last minute, because I was like, man, this might affect borders and stuff. So I went to Spain, designed a bunch of stuff because I'm like, I don't know when I'm going to go be able to come back. And then in March of that year, things got really crazy. And I sat our whole team down. I bought everyone lunch, and I'm just trying to put on a brave face. Like no one will get fired. No one will get laid off. No one will get furloughed. No pay cuts. All the stores will be closed, but everyone will get paid their normal, stay at home and watch Netflix all the time. I don't care. Like you will get paid health insurance benefits. Like the team, you are my family. Nothing will happen. And I put on a brave face, but in my heart, I was really scared. I was really, really scared. That was probably the scariest moment for me because it felt so out of my control, and everyone was looking to me. Like when you're at the top, right? Like, and you guys know this, but when you're at the very, very top, there's no one really looking out for you. Like no one's asking you how you're doing. You're having to look to your whole team and reassure them. But then it's that loneliness at the top. I really, really felt it in that meeting because everyone, I knew, okay, we have single parents, we have people with special needs, we have people relying on our healthcare, and we have mental health, people going to therapy, all these things. Like I was so close to all of them. I knew exactly and specifically how a pay cut or a being laid off would affect their life. And so I was putting on a brave face, but I did not know in that moment if what I was saying was going to be able to be possible. But it ended up working out. But yeah, that was the scariest I've felt in my entrepreneurship journey. That moment, that conversation.
Yeah. So this is almost like the opposite question, but a lot of times entrepreneurs, like, we see things before other people see them. So you have to have that irrational confidence. But I guess what was the moment when you realized, maybe I'm not being irrationally confident, this thing actually is going to work?
Oh man, that's a really good question. I think I was shocked that we hit our Kickstarter goal. That's early days, right? Like, but like that was like the first moment when I was like, whoa, like I just sold $50,000 worth of socks. Like that's cool. That's interesting. But I mean, you guys are super smart and super capable. And I imagine you've been successful at things that you put your heart to your whole lives. And so I kind of grew up that way too. I felt smart. I was successful. When I tried something, it worked out. If I tried a new sport, I got quickly good at it. And so the Kickstarter was just another one of those, like, I'm Kory Stevens and I can do hard things and I'm just going to raise 50 grand in sock sales. I think for me, when I won Entrepreneur of the Year for Ernst & Young, and that was probably, that was the most special moment for me personally, that was the most special moment of Taft for me. That was just, I struggled to celebrate the little victories along the way. Like I was always looking for like, oh, when we sell, I'll be happy. That's the victory. All of these, it's all just a path to that. And I never stopped to celebrate the little moments that are really special. But that night, when I got that award, was the first time I realized that I had done something that was noteworthy and that other people valued. Yeah, that was probably the highlight of my entire career. And unfortunately, it happened pretty early. So I don't know what's going to top that, but that was probably the moment where I was like in a room full of, I don't know, 1,000 people in tuxedos and gowns, and being able to get up on stage and just thank everyone and see everyone's like, there was some standing ovations, and like, it just filled my heart with like, wow, Taft is cool and Taft is successful, and what I am doing is worthwhile and meaningful to some people. But then, the next day, head down. I remember, dude, like, don't ever be like this, but I remember we had our first $1 million day, and I was so pumped. And then immediately I turned to my wife. The team celebrated, we're eating lunch together, whatever. And I turned to my wife. I'm like, Mal, I bet Amazon does $1 million in like a second or two. And she's like, Kory, are you kidding me? Like, you can't, like, you just did $1 million in a day, and you're comparing yourself to Amazon, and you're letting Jeff Bezos steal your joy in this moment. Like, come on, and like, so I struggle to do that, but that moment on that stage was a victory for me, and it felt great.
The other thing I'll say is just kind of like looking from the outside in, people wanting you on their podcast. Like I see the way people talk about you on LinkedIn and stuff. So people admire you and what you've done. So I think that's kind of an accomplishment in itself as well.
Yeah. Yesterday I was on a podcast, and he said, hey, I posted and said, hey, send me questions to ask Kory. And he said, dude, I have had, 50 to 60 founders on this podcast, and I've never gotten anywhere close to as many questions as this. And that made me feel really special, because I think that, now that I'm stepping away from Taft, the irrational voice in my head is saying things like, well, who are you without Taft? All your friends, all your network, all your connections are because of Taft. Now that Taft is gone, your friends are gone. They like the business. They like the success of Taft. They like the cool shoe company. Who are you without it? And that's the kind of things I'm telling myself in my mind. And then I appreciate you saying that, because I didn't always do a great job at, like we see a lot of it on LinkedIn and just like personal branding, right? Like, you are a brand, you are a story. You need to like build your influence and build your network and connections and all these things. And I'm pretty shy. I'm uncomfortable talking to people. In big parties and events, I either have a baby in my arms, or I'm like pretending to be on a phone call, like literally pretending. Like I'll be talking on the phone, because I just get really nervous and uncomfortable, and my social anxiety is pretty high. And so I've always worried, like, man, did I squander Taft away? Like, did I do enough? Right now I'm like, man, should I consult? But who would pay me to consult? Like, what have I even done? Like, I have a lot of self-doubt. And I mean, Aaron, you probably know, I mean, this is how we met. Like, I've been trying to be a little bit more active on there, because I'm just trying to be an individual and separate myself from Taft. And I just don't know how meaningful. I mean, I know my self-worth and my value personally, but professionally, like, I just don't know if what I've done is special, or who I am is very noteworthy and special and unique. And like, do I have influence? Who am I as a person? What am I good at? What do I like? What do I want to do? All these huge life questions, right? That's what I've been spending a lot of time thinking about. And so I appreciate you saying that, because, I struggle to feel that way personally. Yeah. So
it's kind of funny, because I don't know if you remember the exact way that we met through LinkedIn, but it was actually like a conversation about Peter Crouch's Premier League legacy. And then
dude, yeah, because you were like, no way he's a top 10 striker in the Premier League. And I'm like, well, and then it was Ben Perkins.
Exactly.
So are you a soccer guy? I mean, I see the soccer ball on your wall. Are you a soccer guy?
I am. Yeah.
Dude, so we play heavy.
I compared him to Emil Heskey. So that was kind of like my contribution. But then I looked at your LinkedIn profile. I was like, oh, this guy's sick. Like I got to connect with this guy and hopefully, use this as an opportunity to talk to him about footwear and business.
Yeah, dude. Soccer is my, I mean, there's like my family and God, and soccer's right beneath it, barely below it. Like I'm obsessed with soccer. And so that's right, dude. I mean, soccer keeps giving, man. It's like that's how we met. Um, yeah, and the guy, I believe it was Ben Perkins, or I think Ben Perkins,
It was
who's a
Ben.
friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Ben is absolutely incredible. He's someone I really, really look up to. As his business is amazing, but as an individual, he's probably one of the best people I know. And it's no surprise that he brought us together, man, because he's just amazing.
Yeah. I'm trying to have him on the podcast sometime soon. So I definitely want to, because I've interacted with him a lot, kind of like through LinkedIn, but never one on one, like a phone call or anything like that. So we're going to try to have him on too.
Sure, man. He's amazing. You'll love your time with him.
Yeah, but I guess just going back to Taft, you bootstrapped that for the most part, right?
Yeah, so we went, we Kickstarter, we did, $46,880 on that Kickstarter campaign. That's 2014. So we took all that money, we bought socks, and then in 2018 we raised a $5 million seed round. So at that time we were doing about $6 million trailing 12 months, and it was me and my wife and a part-time customer service person. And so we waited a long time to raise money, but we had enough proof of concept that the valuation was good. We were able to demand, good terms, good people on the cap table. And yeah, so that was the only money we ever raised, was the Kickstarter, and then, institutional money in that seed round in 2018.
And how difficult, because we hear that, we talked to someone the other day and they're like, you guys need 10 million at least. So what was it like, I guess, before the seed round and then even after, because that's not a ton of money.
Yeah, I mean, don't let anyone tell you what you do or do not need, right? Like, I understand where that sentiment's coming from. Like, hey, you need 10 million bucks. Sure, like whatever. Like, but 2018 was a very, very, very different world than you're building world in right now. Um, and I think, dude, like the same reason why it's hard to raise money right now is the very reason why factories will be flexible, and they'll give you, they're desperate for work too, and they're nervous just like we are. And so, don't let anyone tell you no. But I think before that we were scrappier, we were more flexible, we were just finding solutions in any way we could. I think after we were able to take some risks, we were able to not just focus on performance marketing, but also able to start opening up like brand and storytelling and creative. Because when you're, that direct response stuff is like a drug. It's like how you keep the lights on, but then you're neglecting the brand. And the first stuff to go is the brand stuff, because it's hard to track. It's intangible. It's kind of up in the air. You don't know what the return is. You're kind of just spending blind money. And so after that, we were able to take some of those more risks. And then eventually we were able to start opening stores. So we had, 6 stores at our peak. They've all been closed now by the new owners of the business. But, we were able to just take some more risks, which was good. But I also don't know if I would have, if looking back, I don't know if raising money was the right thing. We had a good thing going. And I think that my experience has taught me that to just be a little bit more okay with slow, steady growth.
Yeah.
Like our world favors the fast, high pace stuff, but my experience favors the predictable, slow and steady, healthy stuff. And so I think that we flirted with being unhealthy after that, whereas before we were, the unit economics were really, really good. After that, we started having some issues with that.
Yeah. So based on what you know, and if you were to do it again, or just advice for us or people like us, where should we invest and where shouldn't we invest? So kind of like, what does it look like being lean in footwear?
Gosh, man, that's a great question. I think product, like product has to be really good. You see brands with crappy product be really successful all the time. But in your space, in our space, the product has to be good. And so I would invest in the product. I would have higher costs to get better raw materials, better components. I think that the community building and UGC content creators is like the move right now. Like for me, that's all I would do. Facebook Meta is so, I mean, there's people that are like crushing it, right? Like I just think that as a newcomer in a crowded space, I would focus on trying to find ways to work with people that have influence in the space. Like dude, like I had some pretty heavy hitters on my cap table and they did absolutely nothing for me. And so you got to find the right people, not necessarily investors, but just like, people you can pay, people you can give a little sliver of equity to, whatever, because like the storytelling, the UGC, the community is what is going to keep people coming back. Like there's a company here in Utah, I'm sure you've heard of it, Kizik. Their growth has been just, I mean, it's something I've never experienced. Like it's incredible what they've done. And they have that IP moat, kind of really, really helping propel them forward. Whereas, like you said, there's no special IP around Worldy currently. But like Kizik is so good at getting so many people talking about it. And it's not necessarily super expensive to do that. They do it in really organic, affordable ways. And I would invest in that. Like that was the magic of Taft. I also think that, invest in your customers. And I mean like with your time. Like you are going to have so many questions and you two are going to, come together and be thinking. You're going to wake up in the middle of the night, you're going to brainstorm, you're going to strategize. But a lot of times those answers can be quickly given by your customers. And right now, like all you have to do is call them, ask them, take them to lunch, FaceTime them, whatever. Like your customers are at your fingertips and they have the answers that you're seeking. And there's no barriers between you guys. And so I would just rely on your customers to help inform everything you can. Treat them like a teammate, like they are an unpaid employee of the year. They're that 12th man, that magic that if you can rely on them, they'll help inform your marketing, the storytelling, the creative, what's powerful, who's influential. Like the customers have the answers. And I think that I would invest a lot of your time in just talking to them, whether that's focus groups, surveys, taking them to lunch, delivering packages to their door, like whatever it is, spend more time with your customers. And that's free. It's just your time, and do it as much as you can, because that will just help shape that's the foundation. And then everything else is kind of money, but that foundation is something you can't really fake with money.
Yeah. What about getting your customers, because you talked about community building too. What about getting your customers to talk to each other, interact with each other? Like, how do you do that in a way where it benefits your brand?
That's a great question, because sometimes it can go wrong, right? Like you see, I don't know if you guys have any examples of this, but in my world, I have a wife and children, and we're kind of witnesses to a few different companies that have like mom groups, or female, whether it's a Facebook group, private Instagram group, whatever it is. And sometimes those can get a little bit aggressive, right? Like they like mob mentality, and they kind of stir each other up, and then it becomes a negative thing. But we were able to avoid that. So we had a private Facebook group that allowed people to talk like crazy. We were really active on Reddit. And then we had a Discord channel, which I don't know if you guys are on Discord at all, but Discord, it's just for community communication. There's nothing better than Discord. Like it's so fun. You're able to do so many cool things on there. We built a lot of cool like admin moderator tools that allowed for, just good content being generated. And one thing that I don't necessarily know exactly how we did this. I think it just kind of came naturally and organically. But one thing as I've stepped away from Taft is everyone says that I made them feel like they were part of it from the early days. I invited them in. They got to watch, like now there's on LinkedIn, there's this like build in public trend. Like we did that in 2015. Not like don't build in public to a bunch of LinkedIn people, like build in public to your customers. Um, and so I would really encourage you guys to do that, because like even me, like I'm invested in your company and I don't even know you guys. Like I haven't even seen any of the product in person. I know it's still early, but like I would let your customers in the door, figuratively, and because you guys are, so charismatic, it's crazy smart. The branding is cool. Like people will want to be a part of that. And if you open the door and let them in early, that's been what's resonated with people, even, 7 years later. That's what people are like, oh man, Kory, you're done. Thanks for making me feel this way. You made me feel like my voice was heard. You made me feel like I was in on the ground floor. You made me feel like I was part of it. Like that is what you can't pay for that, right? Like that's not performance marketing. That's not what Meta is going to deliver to you. That's just like you guys being you, being great, being kind, and opening your door, opening your social to your customers. And like that will pay off forever.
So does it make sense then? Because in order, just like logistically, if you want to talk to a bunch of customers, like you're saying, maybe go to their house, invite them out to lunch, does it make sense to almost be focused on one either city or geography, just so that you could do that more easily in the early
Dude,
days, or no?
so we anytime I was anywhere, dude, like you guys are in different parts of the country. Like, dude, next time you're in New York City, dude, be like, hey, I'm gonna be at this hotel. I'll buy each of you a drink, post on LinkedIn. I want to show you guys the prototype. Like, come chat with me, come hang. I'll be here from 8 to 10 or whatever. Like, we would, anytime I was somewhere, we would host a focus group. And granted, we had, I was doing this when we were further along. And so we had a big customer base with a lot of followers. And I know it's early, but I think that there's still ways that you guys could do it. But like, Denver is a great area. Like Denver has some sick stuff going on right now. Like we share a border, and I'm aware of some of the stuff that's going on in Denver. It's like, dude, I've had a focus group in Denver before, and it was awesome. And customers came to this bar. We bought them some appetizers, and so many good lessons were learned from them. And so I think that, of course, you kind of want a home base. I think that having a place that you call home, like in Utah, people know that Taft is in Utah, and there's like this sense of pride because there's something cool in the fashion space in Utah. And I think that if you can give people a reason to kind of cling to Worldy and recognize it as, this homegrown thing is helpful. You'll always have that groundswell of home court advantage there. But then, dude, like anywhere you are, again, you guys are so cool, so charismatic. I'm sure you have really good networks from grad school, undergrad. Those are great programs. Anywhere you are, there's people that would love to see you. And if you can make it about Worldy, we had a lot of focus groups, and we didn't even call them focus. It was like meet Kory, come hang out, whatever. But like they'd all wear Taft, and they'd all hang out, and they'd stay longer, and they were way more interested and invested than I ever would have guessed. But it's because we just like, you're part of the team, you're family, you're a name, not a number. Like, like that stuff. So I think having a home court is great. But I also think like, dude, location agnostic, like people will love you. People will love your product, especially if you ask an opinion, people will have one, and they will have it regardless. And if you give them a medium to share it, there's this connection, right? Like it's so valuable.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So we only have 5 minutes left. So these last few questions, we could just do them rapid fire. So how is the footwear?
Guys, sorry.
No, it's all good. So how's the footwear space kind of changed since you started?
Oh man, I think a lot of the newcomers have been kind of squashed. I think that there's like less players. The legacy brands are thriving, and because it's the distribution. Like there was this big push into D2C, and then we were a little omni-channel too late. Whereas the big players are so deep there that they already knew that and they're already there. So I think that it's just like less players, and the ones that are there have a lot of resources and deep pockets and a lot of influence.
And then what about just more broadly the direct to consumer and e-com space? Same trend, or are there other trends that you're noticing there?
Dude, I mean, back in the day, it was like be D2C and sell a bunch of stuff. D2C brands that have now sold or have gone public are hammered, right? Valuations are horrible. Businesses that are D2C are trading like, 90% down from all-time highs. Like the market is not favoring D2C brands. Like this e-com generation has been hammered. And so I think it's just a lot more different. And I think the way you approach it has to be different. Like omni-channel distribution from day one is good. Whereas for me, it was like, no, shun it, be better than it. It's like, no, embrace it and have it be part of the strategy now.
And then do you have any just general advice, like maybe one or two pieces of advice for people, maybe aspiring entrepreneurs or first-time founders?
Yeah, I think this is something I share a lot, but when I speak to like college students or MBA programs, I talk about this. I think you need to follow this formula, no matter what it is. One, differentiated, unique product. Like if it is not unique, there's no reason for it to exist, in my opinion. Second is treating your customers like gold. Treat them, go over the top, write them handwritten thank you notes, like do everything you can, especially in the early days. And then lastly, couple all of that with time and patience with yourself, with your business, with the results. Like great things will not stay a secret forever. And Worldy feels like a secret that you guys have right now, and you're trying for it to not be a secret. But if it's a special product and you treat your customers like family and you're patient and you let things, that groundswell grow and progress and move forward, that will lead to a successful business. I believe I could repeat that formula in any industry. Like that is just a truth that I believe in. Secondly, I think that you really have to take care of yourselves physically, mentally, emotionally. I think that entrepreneurship is really difficult. And if you're not taking care of yourselves, your business will not work. If you're not paying yourselves a living wage, your business is not going to work. If you are not healthy, taking care of your body, taking care of your mind, your business is going to suffer for it. And I think a lot of times we put ourselves through individual personal suffering for the sake of the business, when the business would be a million times better if you two were well. And so I think that from the early days now, I think you guys need to just make sure you're focusing on taking care of yourselves. Take the breaks, take the walks, listen to music, have fun, eat good food, sleep enough, rest, go to the movies, whatever you guys do. Like, don't sacrifice what makes you guys special and what makes you feel good for the sake of Worldy, because Worldy will be better if Brandan and Aaron are well. So don't sacrifice that. I think that we love this, like this suffer, torture ourselves culture, when in reality, everything would be better if you two are doing well. So focus on that from day one.
That makes a ton of sense. And then we touched on this a little bit before, but what passions are you excited to explore now that you're done with Taft, whether that's personal, professional, because I know you have probably a lot more time now.
Yeah, I think, today I chaperoned my daughter's field trip. I'm taking, podcast requests, which I've said no to for years. I'm seeing friends I've neglected. I'm spending more time with family, friends outside. But then as far as what I'm thinking about, I'm asking myself what I'm good at and what I like to do, what I want to do. And those are big questions. And I got really lost in Taft, but I find myself really drawn to food. I think that's, something really nice about something that everyone needs every day. Whereas Taft was like once in a blue moon, you buy a pair of shoes. Well, what about like freaking water? Like I like the idea of this consumable product. So I'm thinking a lot about, food. I just want to jump back into something that people really want. And there's like a lot of tailwinds that are helping me along versus like the industry pushing back and saying, we don't need this. We don't need this. So I'm just pumped to like take a little bit better care of myself overall, be a little bit healthier physically, mentally, and take the time for myself to be better and remember who I am and what I'm about and what I want to do in the future.
Yeah. And I should have asked this earlier, but how'd you come up with the name Taft?
So Taft, this is my family minus one of our children, but this, my oldest boy, Taft is his middle name. So when we got that cease and desist, the business was called Wimbley's. We had this little baby in our arms, and Taft was his middle name. And we're like, we're on the USPTO test search looking if there's any trademark issues with the word Taft in footwear, and it was clean. And so, yeah, the business is named after my first child.
Super cool. Well, that's all I had in terms of questions. Appreciate you coming on, man, especially because you were turning down people for years.
Dude, I'm a huge fan, guys. Like I really believe in you guys, and I'm excited for you, and I wish you the best. And we're friends now, so if you ever need anything, I'm here.
Sounds good, man. Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah,
it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Definitely appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love you guys, man.
It was kind of funny to me when like Kory was mentioning that he didn't even want to be an entrepreneur. Like he had like no, like he mentioned all the like the bad things that like people have in their mind when they think about like what could go wrong with a career in entrepreneurship. And now that he's had a bit of a taste, a bit of a hit, he's like, man, I can't go back. I can't go back. Like, what about you? Like, do you think, I guess this is like our big venture, like our first, I guess you can kind of consider this as like our first time founders or whatnot. Have you been bitten by the bug? It's like, there's no return. I know we have to go and kind of take jobs in order to support the company, but like in terms of like long-term approach, do you feel like this is it? This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life?
So I go back and forth on this one. I definitely want to be in the startup space for basically the rest of my career. But being an entrepreneur, it's very difficult, and maybe it gets easier like the second, third, fourth time that you do it. But some days I'm like, man, I love being an entrepreneur. I love what I do. I don't mind working at all. It's actually fun. And then there's other days where I'm like I don't know if I can take too much more of this stress, this constant working, this never being able to turn my brain off. Like I'm at dinner with friends thinking about my business, or like on the golf course thinking about my business, or like pulling out my phone, checking emails, responding to emails, stuff like that. So I think I'm still trying to figure out how to fit it into my life and not just let it take over everything. But I think working with early stage companies, it's something that is really, really fun for me, and something that I want to continue to do.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like if I'm going to obsess over something, it might as well be something that I like doing. I love being a part of. I love seeing these things kind of grow. So yeah, I think this is, I have been kind of bitten by the bug. Like I don't, obviously haven't gotten to the level of like Kory or Taft, and like being able to see some of the perks that he mentioned and hopefully that's to come. But I think even like at this level, seeing like the opportunity, the chances to just like participate in all these different things, like the founders networks, growing communities, all that stuff has been so like rewarding that it's just tough to kind of like go into like a 9 to 5 and find yourself like sitting in a cubicle and doing some like kind of grunt work or whatever for the rest of your career.
I think what Kory said is, and it's right. He basically said entrepreneurship is basically a higher level of thinking. And I mean, I completely agree with that, because basically everything that we do, we have to think holistically in terms of how it impacts the business today and then things in the future. And if we're spending money in one area, we're not spending it in another area. Whereas, if you're working a corporate job, you have a very narrow focus, you're kind of in a silo, and everything that the stakes are just way lower, right? Like if you completely screw up your job, or even if you don't do anything all day, like nothing bad is really going to happen to the company. Whereas for us, like if we took a week off, nothing really happens in the business. So for me, I think that's a huge difference, and that probably changes as the company grows. But I like having that feeling of everything I do has a pretty big impact on the company today and in the future.
Absolutely. No, I agree with that 100%.
And then just a related question. This is super similar to the question that you asked, but do you feel like you have kind of like the mental makeup necessary for being an entrepreneur? Do you sometimes doubt that, or just how do you think about that generally?
I mean, I think about it based upon like my background. So we both were, competitive athletes, and we had this conversation before in a previous episode about like what kind of like athlete translates best to like a C-suite position. So I kind of think of it as, like a cornerback or a defensive back, like that type of mentality, that you have to realize that you're out there on an island. Granted, you have your network, you have your team or whatnot, but at the end of the day, your team's not guarding the wide receiver. It's you versus him. And there are going to be many a times when you like get beat, when you like lose, when you screw up. And a lot of it's like in public, a lot of people can see it. Like you mess up, and you've got to have like a really like short-term memory about that kind of stuff, and be willing and have that like confidence to move on to the next thing. Like, oh, that relationship was going so well, and then something happened and it like soured, and like all of a sudden you're cutting ties with this individual or group of individuals that you kind of work with, or you publicize that you're working with, and like now you've got to backtrack. Like all those kind of things like are the equivalent of getting like beat like in coverage.
Yeah.
You just kind of like you bounce back, you respond, you go, like you realize that this is a much bigger game. This is not about this play. It's about the next play that's coming up now. That play's behind me. Like let's roll. Let's get out here. And it just like I'm always taken aback as how like this cornerback who just got beat for a touchdown makes a play like 2 plays later, breaks up a pass or something, and now he's like celebrating. And I feel like that's like the entrepreneurial spirit. Like you just got burned, man, like 2 weeks ago, and now you're out here just like jumping up and down because a deal went through or something. So like I think I definitely have that entrepreneur short-term memory type of like mentality, and maybe that's something that I've adopted from my sports background.
Yeah, and something similar, another sports metaphor, and this is similar but slightly different. So the idea of kind of being posterized. So
Yeah.
like, if you go up, you try to contest a dunk, you just get dunked on. You're going to be put on a poster. People are going to make fun of you on the internet. You're going to be on highlight reels, things like that. But I'd much rather be a guy who gets posterized over and over and over again, because that means that I actually tried to block the shot versus just getting out of the way and saying, oh, I don't want to be on a highlight reel. Like, let me just let this guy get a free 2 points. So I think that's another part of it. It's like, you can't be afraid of what you're going to look like if you fail or even failing. And I think it's better to try and fail over and over again than to just like get out of the way and let people dunk on you over and over again. You might feel better in the moment. You might feel like your pride is still intact, but it's still 2 points and you didn't even try and you didn't get better. So that's kind of the sports metaphor that I would add to what you said.
Dude, I like that metaphor. I like it a little bit more than mine, and that's frustrating.
I think they go together. No, I think they go together.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, they definitely do. I like that though.
The other thing that Kory was kind of saying is that he's not really a footwear guy, or he doesn't really feel like a footwear guy because his background is not really in shoes. Like he's not any more passionate about shoes or shoe design than he is about finance or operations. So do you feel like a footwear guy at this point or no?
You know what? I think there are some days that I feel like, I'm a footwear guy. Like especially days when we're like meeting up with the design team and we're going through like different iterations of the design and like, oh, this or that. And like as we learn the lingo, like, oh, the vamp, the throat, and you're saying stuff that like sounds cool because you didn't know about it like a couple of months back. Like then at those points, I'm like, all right, yeah, I'm in the industry. Like I feel like I'm like contributing, like I'm a part of it. And then there's some days that we're doing stuff that's so far removed from like the footwear design element or like even the shoe itself. We're kind of like working on the other aspects of the business. that, yeah, you don't necessarily feel like a footwear guy that day. So it kind of ebbs and flows. Like there's some moments that I'm like really like, yeah, I'm making this shoe. Like we're making a shoe. And then there's some days that like I'm keeping a business afloat. I'm trying to like get to that next day. So like, yeah, it really just like, yeah, like I said, it ebbs and flows. And I think Kory, because he was actually designing, like he had actually like stepped in there and he was the one who was like doing the technical stuff. Like I think for him, it might be a little bit different. For us, we started off like that and then realized that this type of like design, and I think Kory even acknowledges it, is a little bit more technical and requires a skill set that we just it'll take too long for us to do, and it's like not efficient for us to be able to like go out and try to do this. Like we need to bring in people who have this type of expertise in order to make sure that this product gets done correctly. So there are days when I do feel like a footwear guy, and then there are days when I just feel like I'm I'm Atlas or something. We're just trying to hold this thing up.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I probably feel like less of a footwear guy than you do, just because I don't know if there's any days where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm really a footwear guy. Like I'm doing this. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I know all this different stuff about the footwear industry. So I feel like I work in the footwear industry now, and to that extent, I'm a footwear guy. But I don't feel like, just because we work now with so many people who have spent years and years in the industry, they know a ton of things about shoes, making shoes. And we still haven't even really seen what that process looks like in person. We hope to do that soon. But I think once we make a final shoe, like a left and a right shoe, we see it on people's feet, we're able to actually go in person, go to the factory, see it come off the line, point things out that we want to change, see those changes being made. I think that's when I'll feel like more of a footwear guy. But right now, I just feel like I'm kind of working in the footwear industry, and I have a vision for a shoe that we want to make, but it's not quite been made yet.
That's fair. That's fair. I think maybe overall that's probably my sentiments as well. But like there are some moments where I feel like maybe not a shoe dog, but like a shoe puppy.
Yeah. I think that's right. And then one of the other things Kory said is, footwear is super hard. It's expensive, competitive, crowded. There's massive players, especially in our space. And we're taking on some of the most iconic brands of all time. So with all of that said, how are we going to do it?
I mean, that's a really like hard question to answer because it is like an uphill battle and they're like freaking giants on top of the hills. Like it's crazy. So I think what we focus on more or less is our story. Like I think that's like that question was posed to us at the very beginning. Like, how are you going to beat Nike? Like, what are you going to do when Adidas like, recognizes that you're selling shoes? It's like trying to cross the bridge and there's like a goblin up underneath or something. But I think like what we like focused on was like making sure that we get our values right, instill those values into our brand, build a shoe and a product that coincides with that, and have it all into one like cohesive story that no one else can replicate. And then I think that is how we like, that's what we focus on. We can't like focus on all the other things out there. I mean, we don't completely just ignore them, but like our focus, our effort is on like our beliefs. And that's really like what I think like keeps us like carrying on. So that's how we kind of like take on those giants, by like focusing on what we know we can do.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think getting super close to the customer, understanding the customer, understanding their needs, catering to those needs. Because we hear a lot of parents who say, I'm not really satisfied. Like they buy Nike or Adidas or whatever, but they say they're not really satisfied with the quality, or usually quality is a thing that we hear. But, there's various problems, price is one too. So it's not like there's a ton of parents out there that are just completely satisfied with the current products on the market. And I think what you said is right about our values, building community, things like that. And then I think some of the differentiators that we're talking about, they are legitimate. It's just that people don't necessarily, they think that other brands are doing these things that we're talking about, even though they're really not. So really focusing on kind of like multi-purpose use, like being able to be used across multiple surfaces, multiple sports. I think that's pretty unique. Specifically designing for kids and basically building the whole business model around this specific target segment. I think all of that stuff is unique. And when we actually put it all together, people will understand how it's unique. But when we just talk about it and we don't necessarily have a lot of things to show, people can't quite understand how it is different than other things currently on the market.
For sure. And kind of, I don't know if this like completely segues into this next question or comment, but you know, we both like mentioned community as being like our one of the points of differentiation. Like we would be able to like establish and build our own communities. And part of that is like building in public. And so Kory talks about like, yeah, that was something that like during their early days, so like 2014, 15, I can't remember, building in public wasn't necessarily like a big thing, but now it's like something that's a bit more commonplace. And Kory mentions like, oh yeah, don't build in public to the LinkedIn community, build into like more organic communities than that. We've kind of taken like a different approach. We've taken like the exact opposite approach, and like we've kind of started to work with LinkedIn first and like kind of building that type of like community. Do you think that's the right way to go about doing it? And if not, like what is the best way?
I think it depends on the person. But I remember hearing that and I was like, that's a really good point. I've been kind of trying to build in public to my professional network, not necessarily to customers. But I think LinkedIn has been super helpful for us in terms of some of the connections that we've built through that. And I think you have to kind of get the professional connections to get your business off the ground, because you have to surround yourself with people who know, for us, for example, designers, developers, agencies, all that kind of stuff. Like that comes a lot of times through LinkedIn, and having a presence on there just gives you more credibility. And also kind of like reaching out to founders, for example, for a podcast or just to get advice. They're more likely to talk to us and give us advice based on the fact that we have this kind of not portfolio, but we have all of this evidence of everything that we've been working on, what we've been thinking about over the past few months, things like that. So I think LinkedIn is definitely effective, but we're getting to the point where we're close enough to having a product where we want to be on other kind of channels as well. So we've talked about Discord, TikTok, Instagram. I think all of those make sense. It's just, I think it's a bit harder to build in public on those because it's more like, consumer facing. So you want to make sure that the branding is right. You're making a good first impression. Whereas on LinkedIn, it's more of like your personal brand, and it has to be, on brand with your values and things like that. But you don't have to think about kind of like, it's got to look super nice or anything like that. So I think it's kind of like we've graduated from just being on LinkedIn to being on some of these different platforms as well. We just got to figure out how we show up on those platforms and really make a really good first impression with some of our potential customers.
Yeah, no, that was like kind of my thoughts exactly, especially like the graduation piece, realizing that like we have done what we kind of set out to do with like LinkedIn in terms of like surround ourselves with people who can help us build this product and set up this company. And now the next stage is going out and showing that to the world. And that is a bit daunting because we have like this idea that we want to make this product perfect because this is our only chance to make a first impression and we don't want to screw it up. And so, yeah, it's a bit like, okay, there's a bunch of risk associated with this next move, this next like graduation piece, which is like going off and jumping on some of these other socials and really, being customer facing. So yeah, no, I think we went about it the right way. Like it was necessary for us to kind of start with LinkedIn, but now we got to build in public on some other socials, and it's going to be It's going to be challenging. It's going to be different because we've gotten used to it. We've gotten comfortable. It's time to kind of rock the boat a bit.
Yeah. So yesterday we had a podcast and we were talking, this was actually before you joined the podcast. So you might not have heard this yet, but I was talking to someone and she was running her startup. She had a corporate job, full-time corporate job, and she was doing a podcast all at the same time. And she was like, yeah, I was kind of saying, is that too much? And she's like, yeah, it's definitely too much. And then if you add kind of like building in public on top of that, that's just another thing to add to the mix. So I guess, how do you think about, I mean, obviously like the job has to come first to an extent because you have to keep it, right? But I guess, how do you think about building the business, the podcast, and then building in public in terms of prioritization and how much time we should be spending on those three things?
So before we moved to this house, Kate and I were staying at like an Airbnb with the girls for, I don't know, it's like 3 or 4 months. It was a long time. And it's like 800 square feet. And it like sucks because like you're like living on top of each other. And we were able to do it. Like we were able to do it with very positive attitudes because we realized that we were going to be like looking to purchase a house on the tail end of that. That reason why I said that is because I feel like we can accomplish not anything, but we can like take on a lot more than is sustainable if there's like a light at the end of the tunnel. If we know that like this is only going to be for a period, like we're only going to do it for this period, and like we've kind of like organized ourselves in a way in which we can transition out of doing all these tasks. I think it's doable from that standpoint. Yeah, it's going to suck. Like it's not going to be like the most enjoyable moment overall. I think that we'll have some moments that we really enjoy and then we look back on and say like, man, I'm glad we did that. But I think like realizing that this is only going to be for a period makes it so much more manageable.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's also kind
I
of
mean, at
like,
least what I'm telling myself that. I'm telling myself that.
that's what I was gonna say. I think when we're actually in it, it's gonna be like, wow, this is a lot. I mean, I agree with that. The only thing I would say is, as we start our jobs, I would start to think about building in public and the podcast almost as one overarching bucket, which is content. So, basically, how do we put out content that explains the brand, I guess entertains people, brings, puts our brand on more people's radars and brings them along on our journey with us. So I think for me, I mean, I've been posting on LinkedIn maybe like 5 days a week over the past couple months. And I mean, it's been good to an extent, but part of the reason why I'm doing that is because I have extra time. But once I start my job, I think it's going to be way more of just like posting clips from the podcast or just kind of like high level updates or releasing things like the new logo, stuff like that. So I think I just got to we have to be more efficient with building in public and basically repurposing content across all these different channels.
For sure. For sure. And these segues are not perfect.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
I'm stretching them to make them like work, but like we're going to use this one as a segue. We talked about a journey, and with every journey, there's pitfalls or potential pitfalls. One of those pitfalls could be, or it could be like a big boost, is a crowdfunding campaign. So like Kory spoke glowingly of at least his expectation of us when it comes to like being able to have a successful Kickstarter or any kind of crowdfunding campaign. What happens if it doesn't work out? Like what happens? What are your thoughts if like the crowdfunding campaign just like flops?
And I guess by flop it would be under 10,000.
Like LeBron
right?
James flops.
Yeah. So,
Just...
man, I don't know. Like, I think it's hard because obviously we don't want that to happen. And I think we are always thinking about the Kickstarter as like, oh, okay, we'll run the Kickstarter. It'll be successful. Then we'll move on. It's almost like we've been focusing more on just like getting the Kickstarter set up than kind of wondering whether it's actually going to be successful or not. So if it doesn't work out, maybe we look into hiring like a crowdfunding agency, doing it again. Maybe we kind of get feedback from a bunch of different people and see if they can help us diagnose what went wrong. And then, I mean, if it just flops really, really badly, then maybe it's the way that we're talking about the product. Maybe it's the product itself. I mean, I still believe in the idea and the vision, but like if we put it out to the market and there's just no adoption, then maybe we have to think about either pivoting or shutting the company down. So, I mean, I think it's a bridge that we cross when we get there, but I mean, I would probably want to run the Kickstarter again because I know a lot of campaigns, if they fail, they'll try again. They'll improve things. They'll try again, and a lot of times they'll get funded. So I'd want to do that. But beyond that, I'm not too sure. What about you?
Yeah, I think it kind of that's what you just kind of mentioned is that entrepreneur's mindset, that defensive back mindset that you if we were to get beat, and that's like the equivalent for us, at least at this point, like getting beat for a touchdown in the Super Bowl, like that would be like kind of big, but being able to like shake it off. There's a plan if it doesn't work out. And I think that plan is to kind of like use that crowdfunding campaign as a chance to see what we're missing. Like, what are we doing wrong? Going back to the drawing board, kind of watching quote unquote film on it and being able to get better. It kind of like sucks to lose in public like that. But at the same time, it gives you an opportunity to really like assess like what's happening in the business. Why weren't we successful? Was it because we didn't like prepare well? Is it like you mentioned, like, are we not like, is the message not resonating? Are we targeting the wrong consumers? Is the product wrong? So like, I think that just gives us a chance to like go back to the drawing board and get better. And I think that's like the kind of mentality that we have to have. So yeah, that's my approach to it. It's not going to feel good if it flops. It's not going to like, I'm not going to be happy to like go back to the drawing board, but it is an opportunity to get better.
Yeah, for sure. One of the other things that you kind of were going to ask about was this idea of, Kory, he basically got into designing shoes because that's what needed to happen. And, I think the question you had was, have I done anything like that where I felt like I really wasn't prepared to take it on? And I was thinking about that for a long time. I couldn't really think of anything good, but one of the things that like I don't like doing is self-promotion. So the building in public conversation that we had kind of reminded me that that's something that I guess we needed to do. Just kind of like put ourselves out there, put our idea out there, try to connect with a lot of different people, get feedback, things like that. So, I mean, I had never posted on LinkedIn once, not a job update, nothing, before I started posting for this business. And like, I don't really reach out to people. I never really reach out to people cold. I said before that I don't like talking. I know you said that you don't agree with that, but like, I hate getting on these calls and talking for like an hour, 90 minutes, 2 hours. It just takes so much out of me. So I think that's something that is necessary. So it's something that I've done, but it's definitely not something that I was anticipating having to do going into starting this business.
Yeah, I would echo that and say that being like that ambassador, like I never would have like jumped into a position of like spokesperson for an organization or anything like that. And so having to fill that seat, like I think about like some of the weeks that I've spent, and I have a couple meetings coming up this next week, and it's like going on a whole bunch of like blind dates. You show up, to a coffee place or something like that, and you really have to start talking about your business, and then really like trying to engage, and at the same time you're also influencing and trying to convince individuals of stuff. And so like it could be a bit like uncomfortable. I know the comfort level has grown the more that you do it, but that's not something that that's not a seat that I was like, oh man, I can't wait to fill the seat of spokesperson for the company. I can't wait to go out and be a brand ambassador. I can't wait to, like you're, mentioning, build in public and make all these posts on LinkedIn and build my community. Like, I can't wait to do that. Like, those weren't the things that I was like really like super, not that I wasn't super eager, but like I didn't feel like I was super prepared to do. And like Kory mentioned, like it's just a need. Like as an entrepreneur, as like a founder, you have to just like, if you don't do it, unless you have the money to pay somebody else to do it, I mean, it's not going to get done. So you just have to do it. And a lot of those things that I just mentioned, like they were things that I was very hesitant, or felt pretty uncomfortable taking on. But then when you get in the moment, when you start doing it, you realize like, shoot, it wasn't so bad as I thought it was. Like this conversation wasn't as like difficult as I thought it was going to be. Or meeting this individual wasn't as challenging of a task as I anticipated. So yeah, there are a lot of like hats that we have to wear. There are some hats that I was prepared to wear. There are some hats that I think that I was woefully unprepared, but turns out they weren't so difficult.
Are there any hats that you kind of were excited to wear that you're not really wearing?
um that I'm not wearing.
Yeah, like things that maybe you thought before, like, oh, entrepreneurship is really focused on this. And then you get into it
Yeah,
and you're
yeah.
like, oh, that's like, we barely spend any time on that at all.
Well, we started off doing it. Like I thought for sure that it was going to be, you and me in the Fab Lab cutting shoes to pieces, recreating, re-engineering these shoes, going out and 3D printing them, finding weird materials like pineapple, mushroom, leather, or whatnot, and making the shoe out of it, and really like coming up with some like unique concept. And so we did that a lot. We were like trying to like, wear that hat of the designer and developer. And it was fun, but then we realized we weren't getting anywhere. Like we weren't making any like big strides. And we realized the learning curve was a lot steeper than, from the outside it looked like, oh man, there's so many programs set up, we can design a shoe, or we can like,
Yeah.
come up with like materials. Like, yeah, it's not that bad. Yeah, it's a bit more challenging than that. And so like I think that's like one of the hats that I like was excited about wearing, because I was like, everybody's excited about building something new, like building something different, building something unique. And I want to get like, roll my sleeves up and start like doing this stuff. And to not be doing that, I mean, it's slightly disappointing. I still would like to go out there and do stuff like that, but like realizing that you have to kind of offload some of that to someone who is much more skilled, much more experienced in that field, in order for the product to get to where you want it to get, especially in a timely manner. I think that was probably one of the hats that I was like, dang, I wanted to rock that for a bit longer, but have to give it up.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think for me, I was kind of thinking about startups the way that um like celebrities do startups. So, they get an idea, then they go to a factory and they kind of like say, this is what I want. They get the samples right away. If it's like a drink, they taste it. They're like, no, it needs to taste more like this. Or if it's shoes, they're like, no, it needs to look more like this. So I thought it'd kind of be like, we pay people, we get on a call with them, we tell them what we want, and then they're like, taking everything that we're saying into consideration, and we have a lot of say into what goes on. But
Yeah.
it's quite different from that. It's really hard to find the right people. Even when you find the right people, like they have their own ideas. A lot of times they're going to tell you no, or what you're saying is not feasible. So a lot of times they're just kind of like, you know what, this is what I do. So let me focus on this. Why don't you guys focus on the other stuff? And you're like, no, I want to, this is the stuff that's fun. Like this is the product. I want to really focus on this. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like you got to focus on the strategy, community building, like I said before, getting close to the customer. And it's not always doing really fun stuff like overseeing website design or new logo or the tread pattern design or the upper design, the colors, things like that. So it's not as sexy, I would say, as it looks from the outside.
No, it's not. And you end up eating a lot of humble pie. And yeah, I get that fact that you think that you're going to be like sitting up there Peyton Manning the whole thing, like, directing things out. And turns out that's not what really happens.
Yeah.
They tell you no. You're like, bro, I don't pay you to tell me no.
I know. Yeah, that's definitely been a difficult thing where you pay someone and they tell you no, and they basically tell you that they're not going to look into it any further. And you never know if they're just saying that because they just want to get to the next contract, or if what they're saying is actually true. And I think we've seen examples of both sides of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
One of the other things that Kory said that I thought was actually pretty funny, he said that Taft was not differentiated, but that our business is clearly differentiated. So differentiation is something that we talk about a lot. And we have certain people who say your product is not differentiated at all. We have other people who say, oh, it's very, very clearly differentiated. And it seems like it's actually the people in the footwear industry who think it's the most differentiated. So why do you think we're seeing that dynamic where certain people think it's basically the exact same as other things on the market, and other people are saying this is very different and it's something that really needs to exist?
I mean, I believe it's because unless you're like in the space, or you're aware, or you're like, knowledgeable, like if you don't know, you don't know. Like you just make assumptions, you like assume that like there's something already out there, or for sure like Nike has like solved this problem in like 1965 or something like that. So like you don't believe that it's like radical or different because you just assume that it's been done before. And I think that's like the natural assumption for a lot of people. Like they're like, oh man, I'm sure that's been invented, because like many times it has been, like many times no one else has like thought about it. But like it's easier to say like, oh yeah, they probably have already thought that, thought that through, or like that's already been done before. And unless it's like something that's extremely different, then they're just going to assume that it's, it's not much different than anything that is being offered by another brand. Uh, so like, I think that is one of the reasons. And then for those who are actually in the footwear industry and they're actually like designing and making and producing these shoes, they realize like, oh wow, no, there's not a whole lot of things that are like on par with this. This is different than what's out there. It's a matter of like being able to like educate the consumer as to, and get them on that same level to realize like that isn't out there, that they aren't making these.
Yeah. I think it also shows just the power of brand. So like these really big brands, you just kind of think, oh, they're doing everything. They've already thought of everything. And then if they say they're doing something and that they care about something, they really do care about it. They're investing a lot into it, all that kind of stuff. And I think part of it is also education. So a lot of consumers don't know what they don't know, right? They don't know why it's important to design something specifically for kids. They don't understand, um, I guess that's really the main one. Like they don't understand it's important to design specifically for kids in terms of, thinking about foot growth, thinking about the actual shape of the shoe, not squeezing their toes together or whatever. Something that's durable, something that's not just a shrunken down version of an adult shoe. I think a lot of that stuff I didn't necessarily know until I got into the footwear industry. So I think part of that is just, education. And then once we have an established brand and we're associated with designing for kids, then maybe it'll almost flip and people will just trust that we're the best product for kids, even if they don't really know anything about the specs of our shoe or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's right. Any other burning questions coming out of this conversation with Kory?
There's two kind of like related ones. So I think I asked Kory this, but I guess what's been the highest moment for you in terms of building this?
I think, and I don't know if it's the highest moment, it's just the moment that just came to mind, and I think of it a lot, was the moment that we received our first samples, like the moment that we had a physical product in hand, and the reality of it kind of start to sink in that we made something. Like we were working on it at the time for like over a year, and like we were just like, there's so many different iterations of the sketches, and like working with people from Fiverr and Upwork, Behance, and then finally like landing not that they weren't legitimate, but like landing a designer with like the chops to go out and like do what we like wanted kind of done, and then arriving at your door a shoe that you've been like ideating over for the past year or so. That was like one of the higher moments. Like it's like, wow, we've got it. Like I mean, it's not the end all be all in terms of like the finished product, but it's something. Like we've got something here that justifies the effort that we've kind of put into this product for this
Yeah,
business.
for me, it's the same. And then similar question, but the reverse. What's been the lowest moment?
Um, I think like the lowest moment is when, you know, someone, and this isn't like, I'm not thinking of a specific instance, just like in general, so not to put anybody on notice, but like when your expectations aren't met, like your expectations, and most of the time it's like your expectations of the relationship aren't met. Like you don't, it's not that you don't care if they fail or if they like mess up or if they like do something that you like, you know, that doesn't align with like what you want them to do. It's that you have a certain belief of the relationship, and that dynamic like gets drastically or radically changed. Like the rug gets pulled out from under you in a sense, and you have to reassess like, you know, your entire like you know, history with this like
Yeah.
organization or person. I think those have been like some of the like low points, because it kind of like shakes you more than just kind of getting beat in public. It kind of like shakes you because they're like become the, you know, they become like a pseudo team that you kind of rely on, and it's like a family member letting you down. Or like, I, you know, obviously we haven't known these people for years and known these organizations for years, but it's like I thought I knew you. I thought like I could, you know, trust you to like, as we were letting you in, and then, you know, you kind of like drop the ball in a very significant way. So I think that are some of the, those are some of the lowest moments. Um, but those are few and far between, I believe.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think one of the lowest, or I mean, I have a lowest moment in mind, but I think just in general, when you feel like someone believes in the idea and they're passionate about it, and that's why they're working with you, and then you realize that they're just working with you because they want your money, that is a very disappointing feeling, and it makes you jaded. And for me, it makes me, I kind of already have issues trusting people. And then it just makes me feel like in business, you can't really trust anybody. And I think trust is important in a lot of different relationships. And then it just kind of sucks when you trusted someone and then they kind of let you down. But I think my lowest moment was getting rejected from the Chicago booth New Venture Challenge, because that was something that we had our eye on for over a year, and we thought about applying for it in our second year. And we were kind of like, no, let's just prepare to do it in our third year. Let's get a little bit further along. And I feel like we definitely should have got in. I know that there were some people who got in who had been working on their business for like a couple months. We'd been working on it for over a year at that point. And I know a lot of people who, as soon as that class was over, they basically they shut the business down or never even really started it up in the first place. It was just an idea. So I mean, it was kind of rough not to get in, because I thought that was a really good opportunity for us to get feedback on the business plan, have more community, basically like a stamp of approval too, and get introduced to investors. So that was a huge bummer, but it's not something that I think really has changed our trajectory at all.
Yeah, no, I think that was a definite low point, because any time you feel like the idea gets shot down, or like you don't resonate with the people that you think it would resonate with, there's a bit of disappointment. But I think that was like, looking back on it, like a necessary callus, like something that really like helped us like hunker down, and really like challenged us to either like, oh man, this idea maybe isn't going to like have legs, or to take the approach that we took and say like, no, we're gonna like we're gonna show that it does, like there is something out there is something with this. And so I think there was some benefit about not being a part of it that we can take away from it. But yeah, that was that was certainly like a major disappointment.
It was. And do you feel like there's more lows than highs? Do you think they're kind of even? Like, I guess, how do you think about how you're feeling about the business overall.
I mean, overall, I think I have a positive outlook on the business. So I believe that means there's more highs than lows. I haven't done like the math. I haven't counted it and tallied it up.
There's
But
no chart that you have.
a chart, like a prisoner wall, like drawing lines. Today was a good day. But no, I think they're definitely like the highs are much like higher. Like I feel like another like sports analogy. I go off to like the golf course, and I mean I probably just sucked the entire time, but all I can remember are those great shots. Like I can just remember like laying it up on the green. I can remember like the drive that I had for like 260 or whatever. I can remember those. And so I think the highs are much more high than the lows are low. Uh, and so like my outlook remains very positive. But you know, reality of it is there's going to be a bunch of challenges. And just like, you struggle with like, why do I even come out here after you like, you know, hit a golf ball into the water or, or you top it or something like that, or you do something very stupid. Like, oh man, I'm why am I even here? But then like you kind of remind yourself when you have those like those wow moments. So I think that's not exactly the experience that we've had at Worldy, but that definitely like kind of like it serves as a good example.
Yeah, I'm actually the exact opposite, where like for me, I always think about, I'm the same in terms of like I have a positive outlook, but I basically forget the high moments and then I remember a lot of the low moments. So for golf, for example, like I'll shoot the best I've ever shot, and then I basically get in my car and I'm kicking myself saying I left like 5 to 10 shots on the course. Like I could have set a way better record, thinking about the putts I missed or like a dumb decision I made, like trying to shoot it through a tree and then it bounced backwards instead of just playing it safe and kind of hitting it back onto the fairway. So I think it's good for me to have you because I can get kind of like up and down as things go on in the business, and I think you're a bit steadier. So I think it's a good match.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a yin and yang. I appreciate the opposing perspective. It
Yeah,
definitely like keeps me grounded.
yeah, for sure. And then last question I had for you. Uh, so Kory was talking about Taft and how a lot of people actually hate the product. Like the customers, they love it, but a lot of people they see it and they're just like, I don't get it. So do you think maybe we're being not bold enough in how we're thinking about either the branding or the actual shoe design, and we should actually have more people who want to hate it, because then that means maybe we have more people who really love it? Or do you think that that's not the right approach for our type of product?
We had a very similar conversation coming out of the Dylan podcast, the Buddies Gum, in terms of like making it super like polarizing. So either like you really like are in love with it and infatuated with the brand and it becomes like a cult following, or you think it's like stupid or you hate it. And we've talked about that with like Liquid Death and their approach to like marketing water. Um, I think it's very challenging. I was going to say hard, but I'm going to go with challenging to have that type of approach with a kid shoe as a first time, like, this is the first time, like our first swing at it. Because you want to like establish that credibility. Like parents, you think have a much more like protective mindset when it comes to, the product consumption when those products are going to be consumed or worn by their kids. And to have like a very polarizing product could like have a negative impact on parents' comfort when it comes to having their kids don the shoe. So I'm on the fence about it because I like what a lot of these other brands have done. I understand the trend. I think it's super cool, but I'm like, is it right for us? Is it right for us at this point? Like, is that something that we could do with another product down the line? Or is that how we should like introduce ourselves as a very like hate it or love it type brand?
Yeah, so For me, I think the brand itself, like we can't be too outrageous because then, like you said, maybe parents they lose a little bit of confidence in the brand. So maybe it's kind of like poking fun at youth sports and how competitive it is, things like that. But that's the kind of like edgiest that you get. But one of the things that we've started to think about with the design is making it almost look more like a toy where kids want to like pick it up, play with it, put it on, and then start getting outside, running, jumping, playing, all that kind of stuff. So maybe if we have something that looks very like if it looks like a toy, kids love it. Maybe some parents like it, other parents think that looks weird. So maybe there's things we can do with the design where it still looks like it's going to work, but the actual design, the aesthetic is just kind of a bit more polarizing.
Yeah, I think we've heard that from like our branding team, maybe not from our design team, but like they've talked about like making it uh you know, shocking and awing, like making it brilliant when it comes to like colors and design elements. Flat and plain, boring isn't going to necessarily turn heads. And I think I agree with that approach. I guess I was more or less talking about like these other companies' approach to like marketing. So perhaps keeping it a bit more palatable from a marketing perspective, but like from a design perspective, maybe making it a bit more I won't say controversial, but like something that's just going to be different than what you see typically from a kid's shoe designer.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's possible, and I think it's possible to do something that's really cool and that's not necessarily polarizing. That like a lot of people just think that's a sweet looking shoe. Maybe
Yeah.
that's pie in the sky kind of thinking, but I think that's possible. And like you said, I don't think it makes sense to do really outlandish, controversial marketing. It seems like our space doesn't really lend itself well to that.
No, no. But yeah, I like that. I agree with you in terms of like I think there is some kind of like balance that we can like hit with a crazy unique design.
Let me actually ask you one last question. I know I always do this in terms of saying like this is my last question.
Maybe this
And
will be like your trademark. This is gonna be
this is gonna be my last question. Famous last words. Um, so Kory didn't say this in our conversation with him, I don't think, but I heard him talk about this in another podcast he did, where basically he was working on the I think the sock idea still, and he was basically like, "Hey guys, I can't pay my bills. I have a family." He posted on Reddit or something like, "We're running
Mm,
this sale. Can you guys help out?" And then he might have gone to bed or like logged off his phone for a little bit, and then he came back and he realized that he had made a ton of sales, and then that really helped him gain some momentum early on in the business. And I think we've heard that from some other people. And just in general, when you hear about these startup stories, there's these almost like serendipitous moments that allow these brands to either stay in business or really take off. Do you think that we need something like that? Or do you think if we just do the right things, we get a little bit better every day, surround ourselves with the right people, that we'll still be able to be successful? Or do you think there needs to be this kind of like huge serendipitous inflection point that allows you to really take off?
I think my mindset is that we don't need that. Like my mindset is that if we like stick to our plans, you know, handle the things that we're supposed to handle, build this product the way in which we believe it should be built, and create the community, and that's all part of like the plan, then we won't need any kind of like immaculate transaction in order to survive. But with that being said, I don't think it would hurt at all to have some type of like serendipitous moment that creates either maybe it's like a viral moment or something that really like just like gets the ball rolling in a significant way. Like I definitely think that would be beneficial. I don't know how you can like plan for those or you can make those things happen. Those things tend to, you know, that just happen. um and so I don't think we're putting anywhere in our business plan a miracle. Like this, like, oh yeah, we plan to have a miracle in January. Like I think it's just like making sure that we're
we're sticking to like our plan, like chasing these goals, making sure that these goals are attainable, that they're organized, and just hitting them all, getting this product right, doing the things that we need to do. I think this brand can be successful. This business can be successful. This product would resonate with the target audience. Again, if someone wants to bless us, if there's some kind of miracle out there for us, we're not going to turn it down. But I don't think that's part of like our game plan, and nor do we think that that's going to be like necessary for success.